This video will be very different to my older content, and for good reason. Elden Ring Nightreign is such a refreshing take on the Souls genre, and I have been playing it non-stop since the release of the game. This video will contain gameplay and spoilers for the Nightlord bosses that you fight throughout the game, so I'll leave the spoiler warning here for anyone that hasn't played through the game yet. I urge you to play the game yourself if you haven't and just experience these amazing boss fights that From Software has created. With that out of the way, this video will solely focus on the music of Nightreign, specifically the Nightlord themes that we hear through the first and second phases. I am planning to make another video talking about the third phase themes in the future, when all of them have released. For each boss, I'll give a brief description as well as provide my interpretation of the meaning behind the boss's name, but I won't be talking too much about the lore of the bosses unless I think it fits into the boss theme. Although one could argue that the lore has an impact on their OST in some way, shape, or form. This video also might sound like rambling at parts, but that's just because it's very hard to describe this soundtrack in a way that conveys the emotions I think FromSoft is trying to push forward. The music playing while you fight these bosses is, to put it simply, masterful. It shows From Software's prowess and their adaptability when scoring boss music, being able to write for so many different themes, emotions, and stories behind these bosses. This video will go in the order of the boss list given to us in-game, so it would only be fitting to start at the first Nightlord, Gladius, Beast of the Night. Gladius is a towering Cerberus, wielding a greatsword linked to a chain that the boss swings at the player throughout the fight. The theme for Gladius begins with a melodic violin and loud brass, before what sounds like a marching drum pattern begins to play while keeping the rhythm. This violin carries the first half of the boss fight, leading the melody and giving us a very distinct sound to Gladius' OST. It almost sounds like the violin section is describing how Gladius fights in the first phase, elegantly and effectively swinging their chained sword around. The name Gladius comes from the ancient Roman word, and describes a short sword used in combat. It also resembles the word gladiator, and the OST brings this idea front and center, with the marching snare drum and the quick and bellowing brass that gives the song intensity and urgency. This is only the first 30 seconds of the track, by the way. As the song builds up into an A section, we get the brass lowered and more in the background, while the violin plays a melodic line that shifts the focus of the theme, changing tone as the rest of the instruments quiet down. Only the violin keeps the focus, and they build up tension as the music quiets, before beginning to swell and we get the whole orchestra back for the B section of the song. This section follows like a calm before a storm. All the instruments grow louder, the marching drums are barely there, as it feels like Gladius is fighting less as a warrior and more as a beast. The brass and drums hitting at the same beats to amplify the theme as the violins keep playing together until the end of the section. For the second phase, all the instruments quiet before the tremolo of the violins brings us into the next part of the fight, indicating the Cerberus splitting into 3 wolves that the player now has to deal with at the same time. This section of the theme feels a lot more focused. The marching drums are in full force as the Cerberus splits into almost like a small army, and the theme really focuses on this. The track takes a different mood for the second phase. The violins play less of a melodic focus line and more of a fill for the drums and brass that push the song forward. The A section is intense and the drums and brass are at a high point. While the track rises and dips through intensity, the drums remain through the track, even when the brass is fully quiet and only the strings remain, before the B section of the second phase kicks in. The brass in full force, the violins almost taking a step back while the focus shifts from them to the rest of the orchestra. The crash and snare maintaining full focus on the rhythm while the brass pushes it forward. All this combined to create a theme fitting of the name Gladius. Adele is a monstrous dragon with a bit of a contradicting name. At least, it's contradicting when we fight him. The word Adele in German means nobility. This is a very specific choice in naming from the developers, but it has a good reason when given the context. Adele used to be a marvel of nature, unrivaled and what we could consider to be the top of the food chain, a noble yet powerful pillar of the ecosystem. But once darkness of night arrived at his island, all life perished, and with nothing left to eat, Adele became a husk of his former self, a ravenous, hungry, corrupted beast, and he was driven mad by this hunger. His theme shows us this side of Adele during the first phase. A loud drum holds the rhythm as the vocal line gives us a haunting chorus of sound. The tense strings keep the anxious and dreadful nature of his theme in full display. This theme has a completely different drumming style to Gladius, as we are now fighting a volatile, ravenous beast that has gone completely mad from starvation. The track's loud brass and strings carry forward this theme, and when the A section comes to a close and the B section comes in, the music doesn't calm or quiet down. Instead, all the vocals become meshed and wilder as the music swells and the section takes full control of the track. As we get into some more conventional chords for the song, this gives us a sense of that long-lost side of Adele, almost like glimpses into the marvel he used to be. For a few seconds, the track feels like we're fighting a great and noble beast, before returning back to the ravenous and raw side of the fight, until the face changes. A chorus erupts as Adele beckons a blinding purple light around him. Lightning strikes all around the arena as the great beast leaps and plunges down from the air. The track erupts in this chorus and violins as the drums push the tempo. The full theme of dread finally presents itself, as the instruments grow in volume and the A section of this second phase really pushes forward this theme of volatility and unregarding beast. The fast and heavy movements Adele has, launching his body with no regard across the arena, trying so desperately to consume the player, and the soundtrack pushes this emotion further. A towering beast that has disregarded its own safety, abandoning any glimpses of its previous self, fully embracing the corruption and desperately seeking any kind of food, it chases after the player with the full scale of his lightning to try and end you. As the instruments quiet ever so slightly before the section, the B section of this track brings back a very defined melodic line, as the climax of the fight grows into a loud chorus with the strings pushing the song now. As the brass plays the bass notes and the chords of the track, the loud crashes of the drums as the boss fights tooth and nail to defeat and consume. Noster is a magic-wielding moth that is accompanied by its shears, a living extension of their body that does not have a mind of its own. The name Noster most likely comes from the word Gnostic, defined as esoteric, mythical knowledge. Being the wisdom of the night, the name fits it well, since it wields magic and poison, raining down magic while coating the arena in a parasitic gas that infects the host. The theme for Noster starts with a majestic, almost ethereal wind and string section, a soft harp in the back, merely an accompaniment, that soon takes the center of the song, along with the vocals, and this serves as an introduction to the piece. The small glowing moth flies around the arena while its shears attack from below, diving underground and using the earth as its weapon. This soft and slow tune shows at the start of the fight, the calm before Noster begins showing its full might. As the music quiets down, it slowly swells up into the main melody of the A section, a beautiful symphony of strings and winds working together, as the drums only serve as a scarce crash to push forward the track. The voices kick in and the full orchestra plays in symphony. It paints the majestic, ethereal aspect of the name perfectly, as Noster shows the knowledge part of it through its mastery of magic. And as you reach the halfway point, the shears dive into the ground, before the arena becomes alive. From ash and sand, flowers and grass begin to grow, until the arena looks completely differently. You hear the music swell up into a crescendo as the shears and host begin working together, a symbiotic relationship that combines the full might of both their attacks. The second phase of the track also brings us to a more rhythm-focused section, the strings taking center presence as the winds help back them up. You see Noster charge towards you, unleashing beams of magic, while the ground races from below, as the strings in the song sound like something right out of Monster Hunter, to say the least. Or, at least the feeling of those tracks give off. The adventure of hunting down a behemoth, fighting to try and take it down, hunting this great beast as the music quiets down once more before the B section of the track. Every instrument calms down before the music swells again, and we get the climax of the fight, as rays of pure magic fall from the sky as the boss charges. The full potential of the symbiotic relationship between shears and host is in full display, and before long, Noster falls, like the other Nightlords before them. As we learn in-game, Maris is an ancient stellar being, a force of nature that traveled along the skies. Using camouflage and its ability to create a vast ocean out of its surroundings, it wandered until it met the night, and for the first time, curiosity stirred within Maris. The theme starts with a very low drone, instantly telling us that the fight is aquatic themed. The sound of strings slightly out of tune haunting through the depths of the track. The soft harp and vocals push a feeling of uncertainty, as if we're fighting a being that isn't exactly what it seems at first. Given that the name Maris originates from Latin, meaning of the sea, we understand that it is not the primordial force of the ocean, but a being that is merely part of the vast ocean. The track keeps this haunting feeling of depth, almost suffocating tension and uncanny that holds throughout the first section of the song. A light, high-pitched string starts the second phase before rain drums kick in, giving us an even deeper sense of the vastness of both the track and the ocean. The heavy reverb, ethereal violin lines, and pizzicato violin, playing what sounds like a representation for bubbles, carry this first section. The track then swells for the B section into the full orchestra playing together. The melody, more defined, soft but present drums fill the lower registers of the track. As the track keeps growing, as the fight starts to come to a close, and after you defeat Augur, you are left in this transformed arena, a deep, empty ocean, where you are left to think about whether killing this being was even necessary. Libra is a humanoid goat that utilizes frenzy and urchery incantations. The name originates from the Latin word libra and literally means balance in scales. We see this in the boss's design as a large goat resembling a Baphomet. With scales in hand, you are asked to make a choice. Any of these choices have a negative repercussion, so it is best to refuse Libra's deal. Libra is also a bit of a contradictory boss, due to the heavy symbolism on balance and order, while utilizing madness as its main source of attacks. The theme for Libra begins as soon as you strike a deal or refuse it. A bell tolls, signifying your decision as the small goat merchant becomes the fully fledged Nightlord. Instantly, a loud choir erupts as several winds and very out-of-tune violins play together. When the vocals calm for a bit, the heavy percussive elements take center stage. Then the choir returns, and there's a center voice doing something that can only be described as grunting or breathing along with the percussion. Then the A section takes a more melodic approach right before the B section, where some sort of wind instrument takes full control of the track. And while listening to this, the only thing that does it justice when describing the sound of this section is insanity or madness. This theme of madness presents itself in the boss fight, and it is also very present in the track. Before long, the instruments erupt into a cacophony of rhythm and a lack of clear melody before calming down. Then, the boss crosses its legs, and it begins to meditate. If not stunned, Libra and the theme follow into their second phase. A melodic percussion plays, almost letting you know that it might have been a mistake not to stun the boss. A tense and anxiety-inducing line plays as the rest of the orchestra begins joining, instrument by instrument. They join the track once again, even some throat singing and winds giving the feeling of madness, pushing the boss and track further. As the B section of the second phase erupts back into a rhythmic mess, where every instrument feels like it's fighting for center stage, every instrument equal in volume playing faster and more messed up as the track ends the climax, and every instrument calms down for just a bit, almost like a calm before a storm again. The slower tempo is a red herring for what's to come, as the tempo begins to build with every measure, climbing and getting faster and more tense before the music swells, and the vocals and percussion take center stage for a bit. At the end of the track, every instrument begins to play loudly once again, as a synthetic element begins to rise and it feels like every instrument begins to scream. After that, Libra is defeated, and the track closes out with the slowing of its tempo. Fulgor is an ancient centaur, as the game states, consumed with battle. His fervor for the gods he serves yet burns within, wielding a sacred form of the night's power. According to legend, the mightily radiant gods were able to conceal themselves in the roar of thunder. The name Fulgor most likely comes from the Spanish word fulgor, meaning brilliance or splendor, and this is represented in both the lore and the weapon of the Night Lord. Wielding a sacred weapon and creating a holy version of the knight's power, the title of Nightglow is there for good reason, since he is the only Night Lord who seems to use his splendor and prowess for the holy, while the others are usually weak to holy damage. His theme starts off with a sharp and loud horn section as a bell tolls, signifying the start of the fight. The brass brings us to the violin section, joining along before vocals tune in as well. The A section of the track begins with a chorus of voices chanting in some unintelligible language, which From Software often uses in their tracks. These probably represent the ancient language Fulgor spoke, given that he is described as ancient. The instruments quiet down and the brass and drums take us into the next section of the track. The horns now lead fully along with the voice in synchronous movements. They move the track forward. Before long, we only get violins and vocals to show the low points of the track, as all the music quiets ever so slightly before beginning to build back up. This B section of the track exhibits a choir of voices all chanting together as the horns and drums change the rhythm of the section, changing drastically from the time signature of the last two sections. These vocals, along with the hard-hitting drums, horns, and the rest of the instruments, provide a climax to the first phase, the high point before we resolve. As the section changes once again, a crash brings us to the C section, which is almost like a second chorus with longer held notes in the choir to finish out the first phase. We see an abyssal mass resembling an arm erupt from Fulgor's missing limb, and he leaps into the air and causes a massive shockwave. We hear the chorus and violins take full control of this part of the track, as an opening line erupts with both instruments playing alongside one another, while the drums and brass support. We get a similar vocal line to the last section, but it definitely varies a lot. We can tell the brass is now supporting, as violins and vocals take the center stage. The change in the control of the instruments could symbolize the change in control of the Night Lord, since this dark, abyssal arm he now wields appears to be influenced by the night, dimming his splendor and light and leaving a dark, unforgiving abyss in its place. The other Nightlord themes featured a lot of strings as the center of the track, and I believe this change by the composer was meant to show how the night began to take control of this fight through the strings being more present the same way they are in the rest of the tracks. The chorus erupts once again after a brass section, almost trying to take control back from the center instruments, before getting overshadowed fully by the vocals and violin for a B section. The brass tries to support the loud chorus, but the violins and vocals definitely take over the track fully at this point, as we get a violin line to further push this symbolism. The music calms down as the violins and vocals remain. Everything quiets before the music erupts once again in a full chorus of strings and voice taking the B section. The chants get louder as the brass now just serves as support for the harmony. The loud crashes and violin runs working together to give the track a bombastic sense of fighting a great but lost warrior. And shortly after, the fight is over and Fulgor falls. Caligo is described as a prehistoric dragon that lurks in the fog. The name Caligo originates from Latin and is usually referred to as the dimness of light, which is very fitting for a boss focused on fog and cold. Her theme begins with a bell accompanied by a piano melody as voices and strings start to chime in. It's a very soothing start to a fight, something we only saw with Maris, although in their case, Maris' track was unnerving. The slow start comes to a close as the orchestra dies down slowly, before the song swells and rises back up as the volume increases and a choir erupts. Crash cymbals, strings, and the piano back up this vocal line. The first motif of the track plays here, a somber, gentle, and bittersweet melody that is incredibly memorable, a glimpse into the majestic nature of Caligo, before the track goes onto a minor harmony section. The tone shifts slightly before coming back to those gentle strings and piano that hold the song together. As this section ends, the motif plays again, this time louder and wider as the orchestra swells up again, before all the instruments except the strings and piano remain as we reach the halfway point. We see Caligo begin to channel all the cold and frost it can as the music swells even higher than the first phase, as the entire orchestra plays for Caligo's transition to her second phase. A roar sent up to the sky as the soundtrack changes tone drastically. This second phase has my favorite part of the soundtrack, and it's hard to describe it well, so I'll just let it play out so you can listen to this part. The choir, the strings, the full orchestra erupts for these sections, a cacophony of gentle melodies being transformed into a loud and intense section. Before long, the B section starts to play, as drums follow the rhythm before the crescendo. When we arrive at this part, the choir takes center stage. The piano is still present, but overshadowed by the vocals. The harmony and melody working together to create this incredible section that has so much feeling and emotion behind it. All you can really say about this track is how incredibly well it works alongside the gameplay of the fight. Hellstore is probably one of the best boss fights From Software has ever made. He strikes a perfect balance between his tricky timings and damage, or being fair but punishing. As the game states, Hellstore wanders beyond the boundless night, just a hazy figure of a person. That is the knight's origin, and enemy to the world. The name Hellstore comes from Old English, and it means darkness, a veil, concealment, and more specifically, a hole or sheath. This name represents the boss perfectly, as we'll soon find out. His boss fight begins with the visage of a shambling, directionless husk, bound in golden marked wraps around his body, and dragging his sword slowly across the sand. When we approach him, his theme begins. The first instrument that we hear for his theme is the violin, showing us that this is the origin of the night, both in song and lore. A somber melody plays as a small crash brings us into the A section of the track. A cold and dark melody formed by the string section plays as the husk swings towards us, barely being able to stand upright. It seems he appears weak, but his damage would make us think otherwise. His theme is in a 3/4 time, a slow waltz with only strings and slight percussion, before that iconic harp and piano from Elden Ring's final boss plays. Sounding similar to the theme of the final boss of Elden Ring for a few seconds, the violins soon overtake the other instruments once again, enveloping them in a dark and somber tune. As we damage Hillstor, his bindings give out, and his other hands are set free, as we see him pull out a weapon we are deeply familiar with in the Souls games. The strings take a turn towards a rhythmic section, while a violin leads the melody. An elegant waltz as the boss swings, faster, more aggressive, cold, uncaring. The beautiful melody that plays from this violin, accompanied by the rest of the strings in this track, is a truly unforgettable feeling. The slow telegraphs only to swing quickly, the charges at the player as we dodge and weave through his sword swings. It's such an interesting fight. We hear the strings begin to speed up in their rhythm section, while the only instruments left in the track are strings and slight percussion. Some bells ring out, but the strings are the focus, because this boss is the origin of night, and the purity of the track further showcases that. And, before long, the husk falls to the ground as a dark abyss grows from inside the fallen being, enveloping the entire arena. We lose sight as the night is set free. The feeling of seeing Hellstor, the swirling vortex behind him, the mesmerizing scenery, followed by this haunting chorus with a vocal section, was such a memorable part of the game. Hellstor, the Nightlord, approaches us now. A bell rings and the string section returns, even larger sounding this time, now accompanied by percussion as the music swells and we're brought into the A section. A crash starts us off as the purity of this track unravels. Only strings, percussion, and vocals are present here. The highest represented instruments in this game's soundtrack, always characterizing the night, have been strings. The music is intense but elegant. It's dreadful and dark, the same as Hellstor. His swings are faster, the full might of his glowing sword comes forth, swinging while sending out beams of light through the sword. He teleports and dashes at us. His swings are relentless. The strings in this section are restless. The vocals chant on as the full force of the night attacks, giving the player some openings, but constantly pressuring. And as the music swells once again, we arrive at the B section of this track, the crescendo of vocals, strings, and percussion. The intense melodic lines of voices and counterpoint with strings, everything makes an unforgettable track, and when Hellstor reaches half health, the music dies down. Only the haunting vocals from the start remain. I cannot do justice to the incredible work at From Software's music team with describing how the second phase felt to witness for the first time. We see Hellstor channel the power of the other Nightlords through himself, slicing the very night sky we fight under, coating his weapon in their respective element as a chorus erupts, fast string lines and loud crashes and those same marching drum patterns from the first track come back. The full power of the night is on display as the arena glows from Hellstor's power alone, the eye opened in the sky as the A section of the track plays. A cinematic, powerful choir with the snares and crashes, followed with backing strings played while we dodge through Hellstor's attack. We get so many motifs in this track, and they are all so memorable that I'm better off playing them to display how amazing the composition really is. We see Hellstor use all his might in this battle, and during the last parts of the fight, a piano melody creeps in. This last section of the track is tragic, dark, and at times warm, like the signaling of dawn finally approaching after a long night. Pianos are often used in FromSoft's final bosses due to the somber and tragic sound they have to them, and this boss was no different. Before long, the piano gets overshadowed by the night once more. One final attempt to end the player by Hellstor as the drums, strings, and the choir are in full force and the track is brought to a dramatic close, the same way as Hellstor is brought to an end. From Software always has a strong link between the music and gameplay. The tracks tell us just as much about the boss as the gameplay or item descriptions will. Nightreign made me want to make this video because of how truly impactful each of these tracks was on the fights. Each song fit its respective boss perfectly, and it's truly difficult to describe these in detail and do a proper job at conveying how they made me feel on the first time through these fights. In my opinion, these bosses are some of From Software's best work, and I really can't wait to see what else they have in store for us. I don't know how this video will do compared to my usual uploads, but Nightreign has made me so enthralled and so amazed by the sheer quality of work that I could not help but write this video. Let me know if you'd like to see more stuff like this from me, and thank you for watching.